The worn leather of a heavy work boot strikes the unforgiving gravel of the Texas earth under a merciless, blistering sun. The heat radiating from the ground distorts the horizon into a wavering mirage of dust and dry brush. Calloused, cracked hands, scarred from years of barbed wire and rope, grip the rusted metal of a pickup truck tailgate. They are not the hands of a man holding a microphone to a roaring crowd, but the hands of a man who has reached the absolute end of his endurance. With a violent, echoing metallic slam, the tailgate is shut. Thrown inside the truck bed, resting against a spare tire and a pile of dirty canvas tarps, is a battered guitar case. It lies there like a discarded relic, an object stripped of all its magic and worth. The man standing by the truck is a fortress of a human being, broad-shouldered and quiet, but his face is a mask of stone. His jaw is clenched so tight the muscles twitch beneath his sun-baked skin. His eyes, shadowed beneath the brim of a sweat-stained cowboy hat, reveal a soul that has been systematically crushed by the weight of endless defeat. He is giving up. The man who holds the spirit of true country music in his very bones is ready to trade his voice for the silent, grueling labor of a cattle pen. But across the yard, standing on the creaking wooden boards of a humble porch, is Norma. She holds their young son tightly against her hip. She does not weep. She does not offer a soft, comforting smile. Her gaze cuts across the dusty expanse of the yard like the crack of a rawhide whip. The contrast is immediate and devastating. The strong, stoic cowboy has broken, shattered into pieces by a world that refuses to listen, while the seemingly fragile woman standing in the shadow of the porch remains the only unbreakable pillar left in their crumbling world. It is the exact second where the destiny of a legend is bleeding out in the Texas dirt, kept alive only by a mother and wife who flatly refuses to accept the death of a calling. The air in San Marcos during the late 70s is thick, heavy with the scent of melting asphalt, dried hay, and the distant impending promise of a thunderstorm that never seems to break. The apartment they rent is barely large enough to hold the stifling heat that settles into the walls. A solitary ceiling fan spins with a lazy, rhythmic clicking sound, doing nothing but pushing the hot air in endless circles. George sits at the small, chipped Formica kitchen table. His broad shoulders are hunched forward, carrying an invisible, suffocating burden. His plaid shirt reeks of stale beer, cheap cigarette smoke, and the sour sweat of desperation. It is the smell of the dimly lit, dangerous honky-tonks where he played the night before, to a crowd of 20 intoxicated strangers who barely looked up from their glasses to hear him sing. At the narrow metal sink, Norma stands with her hands submerged in soapy, lukewarm water. She is washing baby bottles, her movements precise and mechanical. Behind her tired eyes, she is running the brutal, unforgiving mathematics of poverty. She is calculating exactly how to stretch 10 crumpled dollars to cover milk, bread, and gasoline for the rest of the agonizing week. There is no room for luxury, no room for rest, and absolutely no room for weakness. They are bound together not by whispered affections or soft romantic gestures, but by a fierce, unspoken covenant of survival. They are two soldiers sharing a trench, fighting a war against obscurity and empty pockets. George rubs a hand over his exhausted face. The physical toll of his dual existence is written into the deep lines around his eyes. By day, he wrestles cattle, inhaling the choking dust of the ranches, his muscles burning from the brute force required to earn a meager hourly wage. By night, he drives hundreds of miles down pitch-black Texas highways, his eyes heavy, his mind numb, chasing a mirage that keeps moving further away. It is on one of these desolate stretches of highway, just a week prior, that the true measure of the man is revealed. The rain was coming down in sheets, a sudden, violent Texas downpour that turned the dusty roads into slick, treacherous mud. George was driving home from a gig that paid him barely enough to cover the fuel it took to get there. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his mind consumed by the eviction notice sitting on the kitchen counter. The darkness was absolute, save for the weak yellow beams of his truck headlights. Through the driving rain, he saw the hazard lights blinking weakly on the shoulder of the road. Most men, exhausted and broken by their own failures, would have kept driving. The world had given George nothing but closed doors, and he owed the world nothing in return. But George pulled his heavy truck over, the tires sliding in the mud. He stepped out into the freezing downpour, pulling his collar up against the biting wind. An old, battered sedan was sinking into the mud. Beside it stood an elderly man, shivering violently, his clothes soaked through to the bone. In the back seat, a young boy with terrified eyes watched the storm rage. The old man had blown a tire, and his jack had sunk deep into the soft earth, rendering it useless. He was helpless, stranded in the middle of nowhere, entirely vulnerable to the harsh elements. George did not ask questions. He did not complain about his own exhaustion. He simply waded into the freezing mud. He retrieved a heavy wooden plank from the bed of his truck, wedged it under the old man's jack to create a solid foundation, and went to work. The mud coated his hands, his clothes, his face. The cold bit into his joints, aching from the ranch work of the day. For 45 minutes, in the blinding rain, George fought the rusted lug nuts and the sinking earth. When the spare tire was finally secured, George stood up, wiping the mud from his face with the back of a bleeding hand. The elderly man, his voice trembling with cold and immense gratitude, reached into his worn leather wallet. He pulled out a damp $20 bill, a fortune to a man in George's position, and held it out with a shaking hand. George looked at the money. He thought of the eviction notice. He thought of the milk Bubba needed, but he looked at the old man and the terrified boy in the back seat, and he gently pushed the man's hand away. "Mom, keep your money," George said, his voice steady and calm over the roar of the storm. "We all find ourselves stuck in the mud sometimes. Just get this boy home safe." The old man looked at him, tears mixing with the rain on his wrinkled face. "The Lord sees your heart, son," the old man whispered. "He sees the road you are walking." George tipped his soaked hat, got back into his freezing truck and drove away into the night, shivering, penniless, but holding on to the quiet, unshakable dignity of a man who knows what is right. He did not help for a reward. He helped because the values forged into his soul demanded it. Now sitting at the kitchen table, in the stifling heat of the apartment, that dignity is being tested to its absolute limits. The mail has arrived. Among the final notices and the past due bills is a thick, expensive-looking envelope bearing the embossed logo of a major record label in Nashville. It is the Holy Grail, the answer to their prayers, the salvation they have bled for. George stares at the envelope. His calloused fingers hesitate before tearing the paper. The sound of the rip is deafening in the quiet kitchen. Norma stops washing the bottles. The water drips slowly from her hands into the sink. She does not turn around, but her entire body tenses, bracing for the impact. George unfolds the heavy, crisp letterhead. His eyes scan the typewritten words. It is not a contract, it is not an invitation. It is a standard, cold, corporate execution. The words leap off the page, striking him like physical blows. Too traditional, out of touch with the current market, lacks the pop appeal required for modern radio. The executives in Nashville, the men in expensive tailored suits sitting in air-conditioned high-rises, have rendered their verdict. They are looking for the urban cowboy. They want sequined shirts, drum machines, and a polished plastic sound that can sell millions of records to people who have never set foot on a dirt road. They do not want the dust, the sweat, the authentic swing of the Texas plains. They do not want the man who stops in the freezing rain to change a tire. They despise the worn Stetson and the scuffed boots. They view his authenticity not as a gift, but as a liability. George reads the words again, and a cold, dark void opens in his chest. The rejection is not just professional, it is deeply personal. It is a rejection of who he is, of the people he represents, of the very soil he works with his hands. The industry has looked at his soul and declared it worthless. The sound of the paper being crushed echoes through the small room. George grips the letter so tightly, his knuckles turn bone white. He crumples the heavy paper into a tight ball, the physical manifestation of his dying dream. The stoicism that has carried him through years of brutal labor and empty barrooms finally cracks. His broad shoulders shake, just once, a microscopic tremor of a man breaking under an impossible weight. He looks up and sees Norma watching him. He looks at Bubba sleeping in the corner. He feels the bitter, acidic taste of failure burning in the back of his throat. He has failed as a provider. He has dragged his family through the dirt for a phantom. The conflict is no longer just about music. It is about survival. It is the raw, unpolished talent of the working man thrown against the elitist, manufactured machinery of the big city. It is the crushing responsibility of feeding a child versus the selfish pursuit of an impossible dream. The descent accelerates into a dizzying, suffocating downward spiral. The days blur into a montage of absolute exhaustion. George drives hundreds of miles across the desolate Texas highways, the white lines flashing by like the ticking of a countdown clock. He plays in dark, smoke-filled clubs where the smell of spilled whiskey and cheap perfume makes him nauseous. He sings his heart out, delivering pure, unadulterated country music, only to have his voice drowned out by the sound of bar fights and shattering glass. He is a ghost haunting the stages of places that do not care if he lives or dies. The Nashville executives become an invisible, oppressive antagonist. They are a snobbish, faceless force dictating the value of a man's life from 1,000 miles away. They are the gatekeepers who demand he strip away his identity to enter their kingdom. At home, the bills multiply like a plague. They are shoved into a kitchen drawer that Norma fights to keep closed. She takes on odd jobs, cleaning, mending torn clothes, searching for loose change in the cushions of their second-hand couch. She swallows her tears in the shower, letting the water wash away her silent sobs so that George will never see her red eyes. She builds a fortress of stoic silence around him, absorbing the panic, absorbing the fear, shielding him from the crushing reality of their poverty so he can focus on the music. Her exhaustion is a heavy, suffocating blanket, but she wears it like armor. The absolute lowest point arrives in the sweltering summer of 1980. The sky over San Marcos is a bruised purple, threatening a storm that refuses to break. George pulls his truck into the gravel driveway as the sun begins to bleed over the horizon. He has driven all night from another failed showcase, another room full of people who talked over his songs, another promoter who handed him a fistful of crumpled singles that barely covered his gas. He walks up the steps to the porch. His boots drag. The heavy wooden door creaks open. The apartment is quiet. Norma is awake, sitting in the dim light of the kitchen, a cup of cold coffee in her hands. George does not greet her. He does not offer a weary smile. He walks straight to the corner of the room. He unbuckles the heavy leather strap of his guitar case. The click of the metal latches sounds like the closing of a coffin. He places the guitar inside, shuts the lid, and pushes the case deep into the back of the darkest closet. He turns to face Norma. His eyes are completely hollow. The fire that once burned in them, the quiet confidence that he was meant for something greater, is entirely extinguished. He looks like a man who has just returned from a war, defeated and broken. When he speaks, his voice is devoid of any emotion. It is flat, dead, and terrifyingly calm. "It is over," he says. The words hang in the heavy air, toxic and final. "I am done chasing ghosts. I went to the feed store. I talked to a man looking for a foreman. I got a steady job designing and building cattle pens. The pay is guaranteed. I start Monday morning." The silence that follows is deafening. It is a suffocating, heavy silence that presses against the walls of the tiny apartment. The hero has surrendered. The humiliation of being told he is not good enough, over and over again, has finally shattered his spine. He is willing to bury his God-given gift in the dirt. He is willing to become just another hourly wage earner, trading his destiny for the safety of a meager paycheck. He has accepted his defeat. The dream is dead. If there has ever been a moment in your life where you felt the crushing weight of total surrender, if you have ever looked into the mirror and seen a broken spirit staring back, or if you know the immeasurable value of someone who stands firmly by your side when the absolute worst of the storm hits, then hold on to that feeling. Because the true story of sacrifice and redemption, the moment where a legend is either forged in fire or turned to ash, is only just beginning. The weekend passes in a suffocating, agonizing blur. The air inside the tiny apartment grows heavier with every ticking second of the clock. George does not touch the closet door where his guitar lies entombed. He moves through the cramped rooms like a ghost, his broad shoulders stooped, his eyes fixed firmly on the scuffed floorboards. He speaks only when necessary, his voice stripped of the rich, warm Texas drawl that once commanded the attention of crowded rooms. He is already mourning the death of his own identity, preparing to step into the hollow shell of a man who simply punches a clock and trades his sweat for survival. Monday morning arrives with the brutal, unforgiving heat that only a Texas summer can deliver. The sun bleeds through the thin, faded curtains of the bedroom window, casting long, dusty shadows across the floor. The alarm clock screams its mechanical warning at 4 in the morning. George reaches out a heavy, calloused hand and slams it silent. He sits on the edge of the mattress, the springs groaning beneath his weight. He stares at his hands in the dim light. These are the hands that were meant to pull the deepest emotions out of 6 steel strings, hands that were meant to carry the traditions of the working class to the masses. Now, they are just tools, destined to be torn open by rusted wire and splintered wood. He stands up, the floorboards creaking under his worn boots. He dresses in silence. He puts on heavy, faded denim jeans, stiff with dried mud from previous labors. He buttons a thick canvas work shirt, designed to protect his skin from the biting sun and the sharp edges of the cattle pens he is about to build. He straps on a thick leather belt, pulling it tight around his waist. Every piece of clothing feels like a chain, binding him to a life of quiet, desperate mediocrity. He walks into the small kitchen. The smell of cheap, bitter coffee fills the air. Norma is already awake. She stands by the small stove, her back straight, her hands resting on the edge of the counter. She has not slept. The dark circles under her eyes are stark against her pale skin, but there is a terrifying, unyielding fire burning in her gaze. She watches George pour a cup of the black liquid. She watches him take a slow, bitter sip. She watches the man she respects more than anyone else in the world prepare to walk out the door and bury himself alive. George sets the mug down on the chipped formica table. He reaches for his heavy leather work gloves, resting near the door. He does not look at her. He cannot look at her. The shame of his surrender is too raw, too heavy to share. He takes a deep breath, the stale morning air filling his lungs, and steps toward the front door. He reaches for the brass doorknob. Before his fingers can brush the metal, Norma moves. She steps directly into his path, placing her small frame squarely between the towering cowboy and the exit. The contrast is staggering. George is a mountain of a man, built of muscle and bone, weathered by the elements. Norma is small, exhausted, carrying the physical toll of raising a child in poverty. Yet, as she stands perfectly still, blocking the door, she is an immovable force of nature. "Move, Norma," George says, his voice a low, gravelly whisper. "The truck is waiting. I have to be at the site by sunrise." Norma does not flinch. She does not step aside. She looks up into his shadowed face, her eyes locking onto his. "You are not walking out this door," she says. Her voice is not loud, but it rings through the quiet kitchen with the absolute authority of a judge handing down a sentence. George closes his eyes, a deep sigh rattling in his chest. "Norma, we have been through this. We are out of time. We are out of money. The dream is over. I am a father. I am a husband. A man provides for his family. That is what I am going to do. I am going to build those pens, and I am going to bring home a paycheck, and we are going to survive. Now please, move." He reaches for the doorknob again, but Norma slams her hand flat against the wood of the door, the sharp sound echoing like a gunshot. "Survive?" she asks, the word dripping with a fierce protective anger. "You call that surviving? I have watched you break your back in the dirt every single day. I have watched you drive until your eyes bleed, singing to empty rooms, fighting for every single inch of ground. And now, because some men in suits in a city 1,000 miles away told you no, you are just going to lay down and die?" "I am not dying," George fires back, the frustration finally breaking through his stoic facade. "I am facing reality. The reality is that Nashville does not want me. The reality is that the electricity is going to be shut off in 3 days. The reality is that my son needs food on the table, and I cannot feed him with a guitar that nobody wants to hear." He expects her to break. He expects the harsh, ugly truth of their poverty to finally crush her resolve, just as it has crushed his. But Norma simply stares at him, her jaw set, her spirit entirely unbroken. She has the opportunity right now to embrace the safety he is offering. She could step aside, let him go to the ranch, and finally have the security of a steady income. She could have weekends with her husband, a predictable life, a refrigerator full of food. She has every logical reason in the world to open that door and push him through it. But Norma knows the truth about sacrifice. She knows that if George walks out that door today and picks up a hammer instead of a guitar, the man standing in front of her will cease to exist. His body will return to her every evening, exhausted and covered in dust, but his soul will remain buried in those cattle pens. She refuses to live with the ghost of George Strait. "I do not care about the electricity," Norma says, her voice trembling not with fear, but with an overwhelming, consuming conviction. "I will light candles. I do not care about the rent. We will sleep in the bed of that rusted truck if we have to. I will scrub every floor in San Marcos. I will sew clothes until my fingers bleed. I will take on 3 more jobs. But I will not let you murder the gift that God put inside of you just because the road got dark." George stares at her, stunned. The sheer magnitude of her words hits him like a physical blow to the chest. He sees the absolute exhaustion in her face, the frayed edges of her clothes, the desperate reality of their situation. And yet, she is demanding that he keep fighting. She is demanding that he place the heaviest burden of their survival squarely onto her own shoulders so that he can take one more swing at the impossible. Norma takes a step closer. She reaches out, her small hands grabbing the thick, rough canvas of his workshirt. She holds onto him as if he is standing on the edge of a cliff, and she is the only thing keeping him from plummeting into the abyss. "You listen to me, George Strait," she whispers, her eyes burning with unshed tears of pure defiance. "You are going to give yourself 1 more year, 365 days. That is my condition. That is my demand. You will turn around, you will take those work boots off, and you will march into that closet and get your guitar. You will call Irv Woolsey. You will make them listen. I will hold this family together with my bare hands for 1 more year. If, in exactly 1 year from today, nothing has changed, if the world still refuses to hear you, then you can build cattle pens until the day you die. But you are not quitting today." The silence that falls over the kitchen is profound. It is a wholly terrifying silence. George looks down at the woman holding his shirt. He sees the fierce, unyielding loyalty in her eyes. He realizes in that singular, shattering moment that his own suffering was nothing compared to hers. He was out on the road chasing a dream while she was trapped in this sweltering box, fighting a daily war against starvation and despair. And yet, she is the one refusing to surrender. She is offering her own blood, her own sweat, her own peace of mind, as a sacrifice on the altar of his destiny. The resignation in George's eyes begins to fracture. The dark void in his chest is pierced by a blinding, overwhelming light. The stoic cowboy, broken by rejection, is suddenly forged into something entirely new. He is no longer fighting for his own ambition. He is fighting to honor the colossal sacrifice of the woman standing in front of him. A lethal, cold determination settles over his features. The jaw that was clenched in defeat is now set in absolute resolve. He slowly reaches up and places his large, calloused hands over hers. He gently removes her grip from his shirt. He does not say a word. He does not need to. He turns away from the front door. He walks heavily across the creaking floorboards, straight to the darkest corner of the apartment. He opens the closet door. He reaches past the winter coats and the cardboard boxes, his fingers finding the familiar, worn leather handle of his guitar case. He pulls it out into the light. He sets it on the kitchen table right beside the bitter coffee and the unpaid bills. The metal latches click open, a sound that no longer resembles a coffin closing, but a vault unlocking. He lifts the acoustic guitar, feeling the familiar weight of the wood against his chest. He looks at Norma. She nods just once, a silent seal on their desperate pact. The gears of destiny begin to grind forward with unstoppable force. George walks to the rotary telephone hanging on the cracked plaster wall. He dials the number for Irv Woolsey, a man who once owned a club where George played, a man who still has a few fraying connections in the polished halls of Nashville. The phone rings, echoing in the quiet Texas morning. When Irv answers, George's voice is completely transformed. The hesitation is gone. The defeat is eradicated. "Irv," George says, his tone vibrating with a quiet, dangerous intensity. Get them down here, I do not care what it takes. Get the executives from MCA to Texas. I am going to play one last show. The next few weeks are a blur of frantic, desperate preparation. The stakes have never been higher. This is not just another gig, it is a trial by fire. It is the final stand. Irv works the phones, calling in every favor, leveraging every ounce of goodwill he has left in the industry. Against all odds, he secures a date. He convinces a small group of high-level executives from MCA Records to fly out of their comfortable Nashville offices and travel down into the sweltering heart of Texas for a private showcase. The evening of the performance arrives. The venue is a dimly lit, authentic Texas dance hall, smelling of aged wood, spilled beer, and floor wax. The atmosphere is thick with an unbearable tension. In the back of the room, sitting at a reserved table draped in a white cloth that looks entirely out of place in the rustic hall, sit the Nashville executives. They are the city slickers. They wear tailored suits that cost more than George makes in a year. Gold watches catch the dim light as they impatiently tap their fingers against their glasses of expensive imported whiskey. They do not want to be here. Their faces are masks of cynical boredom. They have spent the entire day traveling to the middle of nowhere to listen to a man they have already rejected on paper. They are the elite, the gatekeepers who dictate the taste of millions, and they look around the dusty dance hall with thinly veiled disgust. They are expecting another desperate amateur, another cowboy trying to imitate the pop-infused sounds they are currently pushing on the radio. They are ready to write him off before he even tunes his guitar. Backstage, in a cramped room that smells of ozone and nervous sweat, George stands perfectly still. He is not wearing sequins. He is not wearing a flashy, rhinestone-studded jacket. He is dressed in the uniform of his people. A crisp, perfectly ironed, button-down shirt, heavily starched blue jeans that fall perfectly over a pair of scuffed but meticulously polished leather boots. On his head sits a pristine white Stetson hat, pulled down low over his eyes. He is the physical embodiment of the Texas plains, unapologetic, authentic, and completely unbothered by the wealth sitting in the back of the room. He holds his guitar. He thinks of the eviction notice. He thinks of the old man in the rain. But mostly he thinks of Norma, standing in front of that door, offering him her very lifeblood for one more chance. The weight of her sacrifice courses through his veins, transforming his nervous energy into a cold, unbreakable steel. The stage manager points a finger at him. It is time. George walks out of the shadows and steps into the blinding glare of the stage lights. The murmur of the crowd dies down. The executives in the back stop swirling their whiskey, looking up with expressions of mild irritation. George walks to the microphone stand. He does not offer a long, desperate plea for their attention. He does not try to charm them with artificial banter. He stands tall, a towering figure of quiet dignity. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," he says. His voice is deep, resonant, and completely devoid of fear. He nods to the band behind him. There is no countdown. There is no flashy drum fill. There is only the sudden, sharp, unmistakable cry of a twin fiddle and a steel guitar cutting through the heavy air like a razor blade. It is the opening notes of Unwound. The music is raw. It is pure, unadulterated Texas swing and traditional honky-tonk. It is the sound of sawdust floors, broken hearts, and long, dusty highways. It is a direct, unapologetic assault on the artificial, plastic machinery of the modern music industry. George steps up to the microphone and begins to sing. The voice that fills the room is a revelation. It is smooth as aged bourbon, yet carries the gritty, authentic texture of a man who has lived every single word he is singing. He does not force the emotion. He simply lets the truth of the song bleed out of him. He sings about a woman who has had enough, about a man watching his life unravel, and every syllable is dripping with the pain and the triumph of his own grueling journey. The camera of the narrative slowly pans to the back of the room, focusing entirely on the faces of the Nashville executives. The transformation is instantaneous and spectacular. The cynical boredom evaporates into thin air. The smug, condescending smiles are wiped clean from their faces. The executive in the center, a man who has built his career on manufacturing pop country stars, slowly lowers his glass of whiskey to the table. He leans forward, his eyes locked onto the stage, completely paralyzed by the sheer, undeniable force of the talent standing before him. They came expecting a beggar, and they are watching a king claim his throne. George does not look at them. He does not seek their approval. He plays for the men who fix fences in the blistering sun. He plays for the women who count pennies at the kitchen sink. He plays for the unbreakable spirit of the working class. The band swells behind him, the rhythm driving forward like a freight train, completely consuming the room. The music wraps around the executives, tearing down their preconceived notions, shattering their elitist walls, and forcing them to swallow the absolute, undeniable truth of genuine country music. As the final resounding chord echoes through the wooden rafters of the dance hall, a heavy, stunned silence falls over the room. For 3 agonizing seconds, no one breathes. The executives are frozen, entirely overwhelmed by the authenticity they just witnessed. And then, the room explodes. It is not polite applause. It is a roaring, deafening thunder of validation. The crowd erupts, screaming, stomping their boots against the floorboards. In the back of the room, the men in the expensive suits are on their feet. The cynical gatekeepers have been conquered. The city slickers have been forced to bow to the cowboy. The sheer, undeniable power of his gift, forged in the fires of rejection and polished by the dust of the Texas plains, has smashed through the gates of Nashville. George stands at the microphone, his chest heaving slightly, the stage lights reflecting off the brim of his white hat. He does not smile broadly. He does not pump his fist in the air. He maintains the quiet, stoic dignity that defines his very existence. His eyes scan the roaring crowd, looking past the cheering fans, looking past the stunned executives rushing toward the stage with contracts burning in their pockets. He searches the dark corners of the room, the places away from the blinding lights. There, standing in the shadows near the back exit, entirely removed from the chaos and the glory, is Norma. She is wearing a simple, faded dress. Her hands are clasped tightly in front of her. Tears are streaming silently down her face, catching the dim light of the exit sign. She is looking at him with a fierce, overwhelming pride. She knows that the war is over. She knows that the sacrifice was not in vain. Across the chaotic expanse of the crowded dance hall, through the smoke and the blinding lights, George Strait finds the eyes of the woman who refused to let him die. He looks at her, the anchor of his soul, the architect of his salvation. Slowly, deliberately, he raises his right hand. He grips the brim of his white Stetson, and he gives her a slow, deep, respectful tip of his hat. It is a silent vow, a promise kept, an acknowledgement that the victory belongs entirely to her. The immediate aftermath of the showcase is a chaotic blur of shifting power dynamics. The executives from Nashville, men who had spent their entire careers dictating the rise and fall of artists from the comfort of their high-rise offices, are suddenly scrambling like desperate men panning for gold. They push past the lingering crowd, their expensive leather shoes slipping on the sawdust-covered floorboards of the Texas dance hall. They are sweating, their pristine suits clinging to their backs in the stifling heat, their previous arrogance entirely evaporated. They have just witnessed a seismic shift in the landscape of country music, and they are terrified of being left behind. They corner Irv Woolsey near the edge of the stage, their voices overlapping in a frantic chorus of offers, promises, and sudden miraculous belief in the traditional sound they had mocked only hours before. But George does not engage in the frenzy. He unplugs his guitar with slow, deliberate movements. He wipes the sweat from his brow with a plain cotton handkerchief, places his instrument carefully into its battered case, and fastens the metal latches. He is utterly unfazed by the sudden adoration of the men who had previously sent him standardized letters of rejection. He knows that their applause is not for him as a man, but for the undeniable, bankable truth he just forced them to witness. The formal signing of the contract does not take place in a sterile boardroom surrounded by glass and steel. It happens in the back room of the dance hall, a space that smells heavily of floor wax, stale tobacco, and aged whiskey. The room is dimly lit by a single bulb hanging from a frayed wire. In the center of the room sits a heavy, deeply scarred oak table, its surface etched with the names of forgotten patrons and the rings of countless cold bottles. This is the altar where the city slickers are forced to lay down their terms. An executive, his hands visibly shaking with a mixture of adrenaline and the fear of losing the deal, slides a thick stack of crisp white legal documents across the rough wood. The paper looks entirely alien in the rustic environment. He places a heavy, gold-plated fountain pen beside it. George stands over the table. He does not sit. He looks down at the contract, the intricate legal jargon spelling out the beginning of a legacy and the end of his crushing poverty. He looks at his own hands, the calluses thick and hard from the barbed wire and the post-hole diggers. He picks up the gold pen. It feels fragile and weightless compared to the heavy tools he is accustomed to wielding. He does not read every line. He looks across the room to where Norma stands quietly by the doorframe. Her face is pale, exhausted, but her eyes are shining with a quiet, monumental victory. She gives him a single, barely perceptible nod. George presses the nib of the pen to the paper. The scratch of the ink against the thick parchment is the only sound in the room. With a few sharp, decisive strokes, he signs his name. The executives exhale a collective, heavy sigh of relief, but George simply drops the pen onto the table, turns his back on the men in suits, and walks toward the door. He reaches out, places his large hand gently on the small of Norma's back, and guides her out into the sweltering, humid Texas night. The transition from absolute desperation to salvation is not instantaneous. The weeks that follow are filled with grueling studio sessions, the relentless pressure of recording, and the lingering, phantom anxiety that the rug could still be pulled out from under them. But the true cathartic resolution of their agonizing journey arrives on a Tuesday evening, driving down a desolate stretch of highway just outside of San Marcos. The old rusted pickup truck rattles over the uneven asphalt. The air conditioning has been broken for years, so both windows are rolled down, allowing the hot, rushing wind to fill the cab. The sky above the sprawling Texas plains is putting on a spectacular display, bleeding from a harsh, blinding yellow into deep, bruised shades of purple, crimson, and burnt orange. The sun is sinking below the horizon, casting long, golden shadows across the dry earth. The smell of the air is intoxicating, a mixture of hot dust, diesel fumes, and the sharp, metallic scent of an approaching rainstorm. George is behind the wheel, his eyes fixed on the long white lines of the road, his hands resting lightly on the cracked steering wheel. Norma sits beside him, staring out at the passing landscape. The dashboard radio, a cheap AM receiver with a missing dial, is crackling with static. George reaches over and tunes it, fighting through the hiss and pop of the dying signal, searching for a clear station. Suddenly the static clears. The voice of a local disc jockey fills the small cab of the truck, cutting through the sound of the rushing wind. The DJ is talking about a shift in the wind, about a new sound coming out of Nashville that feels a whole lot like the old sound of Texas. He mentions a name. He mentions a song. George freezes. He takes his foot off the accelerator, letting the truck coast. He steers the heavy vehicle onto the gravel shoulder of the highway, the tires crunching loudly against the loose stones. He shifts the truck into park and kills the engine. The sudden silence of the motor makes the radio sound 10 times louder. Through the small, tinny speakers of the dashboard, the sharp, unmistakable cry of a twin fiddle rings out into the evening air. It is the opening notes of Unwound. It is not a demo tape. It is not a live performance in a smoky bar. It is the official, massive, undeniable broadcast of his voice across the airwaves. The sound travels through the invisible currents of the Texas sky, reaching into homes, into cars, into the very fabric of the country. George sits perfectly still. His hands grip the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turn white. He listens to his own voice, smooth and authentic, singing the words that were forged in the fire of his own suffering. He listens to the pristine production that managed to capture the raw, unpolished dirt of his soul without sanitizing it. He has done it. He has breached the fortress. He has forced the world to listen. He turns his head slowly to look at Norma. She is not looking at him. She is staring straight ahead through the bug-splattered windshield, watching the last sliver of the sun disappear behind the flat horizon. Her hands are resting in her lap, her fingers tightly intertwined. For years, she has been the unbreakable fortress. She has absorbed the panic, the hunger, the humiliation, and the terror of their poverty. She has been the dam holding back a massive reservoir of despair, refusing to let a single drop spill over and drown her husband's spirit. Now as the chorus of the song fills the truck, the dam finally breaks. Norma does not sob loudly. She does not make a sound. But her shoulders begin to tremble, a deep, rhythmic shaking that originates from the very core of her being. She closes her eyes, and a steady, silent stream of tears begins to fall down her cheeks. They are not tears of sorrow. They are the heavy, cleansing tears of absolute relief. The crushing weight of the survival mathematics, the hidden notices in the drawer, the sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, the sheer, unimaginable terror of the sacrifice she demanded of him, it is all melting away, washing down her face in the golden light of the fading sun. George watches her weep. He understands the profound magnitude of this moment. He does not offer hollow words of comfort, because he knows she does not need comfort. She needs the release. He simply reaches across the torn vinyl seat, wraps his large, calloused arm around her trembling shoulders, and pulls her close. Norma rests her head against his chest, burying her face in the fabric of his shirt, listening to the steady, calm beating of his heart beneath the sound of his voice on the radio. They sit there on the side of the dusty highway, entirely alone in the vastness of the Texas landscape, bathed in the twilight, while the song plays out to the end. The battle is won. The war is over. Time accelerates, sweeping forward in a dynamic, unstoppable montage of staggering triumph. The years blur together, defined not by the desperate struggle for survival, but by an unprecedented, monumental ascent to the absolute pinnacle of the music industry. The camera of the narrative sweeps through the decades. The eviction notices and past due bills are entirely eradicated, replaced by the blinding glare of platinum and gold records that multiply across the walls of a sprawling, secure home. The smoky, dangerous honky-tonks with their sawdust floors and drunken brawls are left behind in the dust. They are replaced by massive, cavernous arenas, by state fairs overflowing with desperate crowds, and eventually by colossal stadiums that hold tens of thousands of screaming fans. The city slickers in Nashville, the men who once demanded drum machines and sequined pop stars, are now entirely subservient to the traditional sound. They desperately try to manufacture clones, searching for young men in cowboy hats to replicate the magic, but they fail entirely because they cannot artificially manufacture the years of dirt, rejection, and stoic endurance that built the foundation of the true king. Through it all, George remains an immovable monolith of authenticity. The wealth and the unimaginable fame do not alter the fundamental architecture of his soul. He still wears the heavily starched shirts. He still wears the perfectly creased jeans. His boots are still polished, and his Stetson is still pulled low over his eyes. The dark hair slowly gives way to silver, the lines around his eyes deepen, etching the map of a long, fiercely lived life into his face, but his posture never weakens. He is the elder statesman, the unquestioned authority, the living embodiment of the values he refused to abandon. The climax of this extraordinary journey takes us into the belly of a modern colossus. It is a massive stadium in the heart of Texas, a steel and glass cathedral built for giants. The sheer scale of the event is terrifying. 80,000 people are packed into the stands, a sprawling, undulating ocean of humanity. The air is thick with the smell of popcorn, spilled beer, and the electric, ozone-heavy scent of massive pyrotechnics and stage lighting. The noise is a physical entity, a deafening, continuous roar that vibrates through the concrete floor and rattles the bones in the chest. Backstage, the environment is a chaotic swarm of technicians, security personnel, and nervous managers. But George stands in the center of the storm, an island of absolute calm. He holds his acoustic guitar, the wood polished and gleaming under the harsh work lights. He takes a deep, slow breath, the air filling his lungs, and steps out from the shadows onto the massive stage. The moment the spotlight hits him, the roar of the 80,000 fans multiplies, reaching a pitch that threatens to shatter the sky. It is a wave of adoration so powerful it could knock a lesser man to his knees. But George simply walks to the microphone stand located at the very edge of the stage, towering over the sea of faces. He looks out at the staggering magnitude of his own legacy. He sees the banners, the hats, the boots, the generations of people who have anchored their own lives to the steady, unyielding truth of his music. He strums the first chord, and the stadium erupts in a chorus of recognition. He begins to sing, his voice deeper now, richer with the passage of time, carrying the immense gravity of a man who has seen the absolute bottom and conquered the absolute top. He commands the stadium with the same quiet, stoic dignity he used to command the smoky dance halls. He does not run across the stage. He does not demand applause. He simply stands his ground and delivers the truth. As the song approaches its final crescendo, George's eyes drop from the sweeping, chaotic expanse of the upper decks. He ignores the flashing cameras, the VIP boxes filled with celebrities, and the frantic signaling of the stage directors. His gaze cuts through the blinding glare of the spotlights and searches the very first row, directly in front of the center microphone. There, sitting quietly amidst the pandemonium, is Norma. She is older now. The years have left their marks, softening her features and turning her hair gray, but her posture is exactly the same. She sits with her back straight, her hands resting calmly in her lap, completely unbothered by the deafening noise surrounding her. George looks into her eyes, and across the distance, across the noise, across the decades of unimaginable fame, he sees the exact same fierce, unyielding fire that burned in the tiny kitchen in San Marcos. He sees the woman who blocked the door. He sees the woman who refused the safety of a steady paycheck. He sees the architect of his entire existence. In that fleeting, silent exchange between the stage and the front row, the entire stadium fades away. The 80,000 screaming fans disappear, the blinding lights dim, the gold records and the massive wealth evaporate into the Texas night air. There is only the cowboy and the woman who saved him. George does not smile for the cameras. He maintains his stoic facade, but as he strikes the final echoing chord of the night, he looks directly at Norma. Slowly, with the heavy, deliberate reverence of a man acknowledging his true sovereign, he reaches up. He grips the brim of his white Stetson and he tips his hat. The true weight of respect and the blinding light of glory are never forged in isolation. The myth of the solitary hero, conquering the world with nothing but his own grit, is a hollow illusion. Behind the Iron Man, who marched into the elitist towers of the big city and forced them to bow to the dirt of the country, there stands the colossal, silent strength of a woman who willingly sacrificed her own peace, her own comfort, and her own sanity to protect a destiny that was entirely unproven. The legend of George Strait, the undisputed king of country music, did not begin in a pristine recording studio in Nashville, nor did it begin on the illuminated stage of a massive stadium. It began in the suffocating heat of a rented Texas kitchen, on the exact day that a broken man tried to surrender to the world, and his wife absolutely refused to let him die.